Boys and girls, ladies and germs, welcome back to the Firefighters podcast. Hope you're doing well, hope you're staying safe, hope you've been kicking ass and taking names. Today I'm joined by two incredibly inspiring authors, two professionals in their sector, Mr. Dan Kerrigan and Mr. Jim Moss. Dan and Jim are the authors of the international bestseller Firefighter Functional Fitness, the essential guide for optimum firefighter performance and longevity. Now, I came across this book a few years ago now. It came out in 2016, and it has become a staple in the development of any firefighter that wants to improve their functional fitness for frontline excellence. But before we get in there with Dan and Jim, it is so important to acknowledge our partners of the podcast, the people that are making this possible. We've had some amazing support from these. So the big thanks to supporting today's episode is our partner, William Wood Watches. William Wood Watches are a luxury British watch brand, but what's so unique about this brand is the way it honours firefighters and makes innovative use of recycled fire service equipment right here from the UK. There's so many brands on the market focusing on sustainability, recyclability, upcycling. It's actually such a refreshing and authentic story about something like William Wood Watches. It is so much more of a personal brand. Johnny and the guys are based in London, but they ship international, so listeners from all over the world can get in on William Wood Watches. There's so many small and significant details in these watches as well, from the Valiant to the Chivalrous. They create in the different colours of the dials, from the red watch to the blue to the green to the crest, the helmet emblem. But the favourite thing for me, and the thing that always gets noted on my watch, is the strap. Now again, whether it's from the titanium wear blue hose or the red or the yellow, all of these have their own unique aspects to it, but they still have that coloration because they've done 10 years operation on the front line. These are hoses that have actually been out there, being thrown down highways for RTCs, been hauled up the sides of high-rise buildings. It really is just such a unique part of William Wood Watches, and we feel so privileged to have them as a partner on the podcast. Now, yes, William Wood Watches is a private company, but in 2020 they gave £12,500 to firefighter charity donations, and in 2021 alone they have donated over £20,000 to firefighter charities. So if you're a frontline operator that is head over heels in love with the fire service, if you are looking for a gift for a retiree, for a close friend, for a family member, for a watch member, then head over to williamwoodwatches.com and check them out. I love my watch. I've had it for like 2 years now. I've got the London Fire Brigade red fire hose on mine, so go and check it out. You will not regret it. And a massive thanks to Johnny and the team for their continued support. So if you're sitting comfortably, let's have eyes down. It's time for Jim and Dan. There is going to be so many takeaways from this one. So listen and enjoy, and then the second time round, listen again and really get those takeaways. You can head over to the website after the podcast and get yourself a copy of Firefighter Functional Fitness. So without further ado, buckle up for safety, and I will see you crazy cats on the other side.
There you go. What's up?
Hey, boss.
Hello.
God, he's got the microphone and everything.
Yeah, you guys.
I'm serious.
You guys are.
I'm serious.
I think Jim's definitely the professional. I'm just pretending over here in the UK. This isn't even attached to anything. It's just for show.
I love it.
Jim, Dan, welcome to the Firefighters podcast. How we doing, boys?
Doing great. Thanks for having us.
I was just speaking with Dan before you came on, Jim, and it's quite surreal. These books seem to be so well known that you expect them to be written a long time ago, because a lot of what we're going to speak about today is applicable to almost all emergency services operators, and the advice in them is timeless.
That's the way we tried to do it, right? I think our biggest, well, I don't want to speak for Jim, but my biggest fear when we were writing the book was that we were going to get about 95% done, and then something was going to come out that was going to sort of, mirror what we were writing. But we were kind of surprised that nobody had actually done something like this before we came along. So a great ride.
Why do you think that nobody had come up with this sort of thing before? Because, facing challenges, physicality in the job is nothing new in the grand scheme of things. But I mean, Jim, what was your motivation for getting together and doing this?
So we started writing an article. We wrote an article for fire engineering, and it was quite possible. It was based on everything that we put together, the basis of the book. And then we basically started to set out for writing an article series based on the Big Eight. And so when we started doing that, Dan and I kind of looked at each other and we're like, yeah, we think we can make this into something bigger, a little bit more thorough. And so that's really how it started. So, 320 pages later, And now it's in 50 countries worldwide. I mean, we can't believe it. Like you said in the beginning, the reach that these things have had. You talk to the authors right now, and we can't believe the reach that they've had. But when you pour your passion into something, you never know what it can reach and what it can do. So we're just grateful.
But going on an adventure like trying to write a book, I've never written one. I've been lucky enough to speak to plenty of authors, but it really is quite a monumental task. Yeah, you've got to have the idea. Yes, you've got to have the passion, but it really is a labor of love. I mean, I know you've been on and written other things, but Dan, is this your first time ever writing a book, or who had the inspiration to do it? Because there's usually one person that thinks it'd be an exciting adventure, but really committing to it is a whole nother game.
I think we started out joking about it, and we both probably realized in the back of our heads that it is a lot more of an undertaking than most people realize. But I would also say that working with Jim has been really from the beginning right through present time and hopefully far into the future has been a pleasure, because, we take it very seriously, and we do really share the load 50-50. And we did that with the book writing. We do it with pretty much everything that we're involved in. So yeah, I joke that I don't recommend it. If you want to think about writing a book, I don't recommend it, because it's but I don't. I kid about that. You have to have the right mindset going into it. And like Jim said, the passion. If you have that passion, it's sort of just it kind of comes out, right? And the willingness to put the work in. We thought we were done when we were finally done writing it. The publisher was like, he said, "This is great. You guys did a great job, and all this. So take a couple of weeks off, and then we're going to go back and rewrite it." Basically, right?
Basically,
we were like, "What?" But it's perfect, But it is. It's a long process. You have to be patient, and you have to. If you're working with somebody, you have to, really be able to share the load and trust in each other. And I think that's what we did. We picked what was probably most interesting to each one of us, or that was in our wheelhouse in terms of the specific chapters. And we took primary roles in certain chapters and secondary roles in other chapters. And we just passed the manuscript back and forth, and it worked well for us. I can't speak for how it would be for others, but it worked pretty well for us.
I love what you say there about being that sort of consummate professional, because yes, we talk about passion. We hear passion a lot. We're like, find a job you're passionate about. But I'm very passionate, but I kind of feel like passion it's the flash in the pan, and sometimes it can be the bit of the secret sauce. You've got to be able to back it up with being that consummate professional, because I've spoken with people before where you have a partnership where somebody might perceive themselves as the talent or the person with the idea or something like that, and that can be so unhealthy. It can really spit out some horrible results going through the end of it. So I love what you said there about being able to really, really rely on each other for a 50-50, because starting off at the beginning, when you're sitting down over a brew or, over a pint and talking about it, and everyone's all excited, but then 2 months, 3 months, 6 months deep, when one of you is like, "Oh, this is a great idea, but I'm kind of bored with it now," and they rely on you to push it over the line. I mean, that can really sour a relationship, can't it?
I think, well, Jim did it. I know he did it for me a lot, where, you would get to a point where you didn't have the writer's mentality. There were times when roadblocks would come up, and, you'd be like, just walk away from it for a while then, we're very supportive of each other and getting ourselves through that sort of thing. Besides, I never thought, maybe it's our humility, but neither one of us felt like we were that talent to begin with. I don't know. I always thought it was Jim, and I was just kind of along for the ride. So.
I mean, when it all comes down to it, we're just firefighters,
That's right.
And we just love the job, and we want to see people get healthy. But going back to what you said, Pete, is it takes that long-term commitment. It takes that persistence. It takes that discipline. And there's going to be peaks and valleys when, you're writing great or you're putting down some good info. And then there's times when you're just dragging yourself through it all, just like anything. Right. So, we never thought we would be writers. I never thought I'd write 2 books or, articles for, major fire service publications, but here we are. And, I think when you just start following your passion and, like you said, back it up with action and commitment and persistence, and then have a teammate like Dan to, iron sharpens iron, where we hold each other accountable and we push each other to to be the best we can possibly be. And I think that's what everybody needs. We can't go at this fire service journey, or these projects. We can't do it alone. So you always need a cheerleader. You need a backup singer or a partner in crime that will help you out.
And you've got to be able to, like you say, be able to find that relationship where you can hand it over to almost hold the note, if you know what I mean. To use that backing singer analogy. Nobody's going to be singing pure for hours and hours. You've got to be able to pass the baton and rely on each other to keep going. So I wanted to jump back into sort of how this all began, because Dan, what was your first sort of interaction with beginning with the fire department, and what made you want to join?
Well, I don't want to disappoint anybody, but my story's not that interesting. I just grew up in a family of firefighters and police officers, so I think I sort of had to do it. I mean, my earliest memories as a child were in fire stations. Climbing around on the fire trucks, watching my uncles and my cousins and so forth. My dad run out the door on a call, and it sort of caught me right then and there. I joked that I used to tell my dad years ago when I was pre-elementary school even, that I would get up in the morning to watch the trash truck come and pick up the trash in front of our house, because I loved how the guys rode on the back of the truck. Yeah. And that's what I wanted to do. And he was, so I don't know if I just wanted to ride on the back of a fire truck or if it was actually me wanting to be a fireman, but that's how it started for me. It just is a part of my life, a part of my family's life. We've always been full of public servants like that. And I honestly can't think of many other things that I would have wanted to do, even now, other than fantasy-wise, like, be a pro hockey player or, a rock star or something. But
I think you made the right decision. Yeah. What about yourself, so Jim? Who inspired you when you first joined the job, Jim?
So it's kind of interesting. I grew up with a tough-nosed lawyer, a prosecutor who raised me. My dad was a huge inspiration to me. My uncle was a cop. My other uncle was a detective. And it's funny, my dad always told me two things. One, don't become a lawyer. And two, don't get a job where you really have to take your work home with you. So that was kind of his advice going up, because he was a workaholic. He worked all the time. He had the strongest work ethic of anyone I've ever known. And he definitely passed that on to me. But it's kind of funny. I was actually planning on being a high school Spanish teacher when I was in college.
You've got
I was working towards that.
I think you could pull it off.
Yeah, thank you. But actually, I got to about my junior year, and I'm someone who's always, I've worked hard. I like the physical aspect of the job and working with my hands and taking my fitness seriously for a long time. And I was just like, I don't want a Monday through Friday kind of job. I don't want to be at a desk or an office or anything like that. So I was really drawn to the fire service and the changing environments, getting to know and interact with a lot of different people. The schedule that we had was here in the Midwest of the United States is, that really appealed to me as well. So I kind of combined a lot of different things I liked. And so I'm actually a first generation firefighter. I'm not a legacy. No one in my family has ever been a firefighter before. So it's kind of interesting from that standpoint. But like you said, Dan made the right decision. I think I did too, because I wouldn't change anything at all.
Is there also a bit of an irony, though? And I just want to sort of catch you on a bit of self-awareness there, because you chose a job, ultimately, yes, when shift ends, when the watch ends, when the team ends for the end of the day, work finishes. But when you're so passionate about something that you do, both for Dan and yourself, I mean, you do so much to do with the fire department, to do with the fire service, in and around your personal life as well. How do you strike that balance? And do you believe there is such a thing as balance when you're an emergency services responder?
Well, that is a great question. And when you're passionate about something, it doesn't feel so much like work, right? When you're off duty, right? So, me promoting and sharing firefighter success and firefighter functional fitness, those are things I'm so passionate about that it's not so much work. It can be work at times, away from my real full-time job. But when I'm so passionate about it, it doesn't really feel like work.
How is it like for the people around you? I mean, for partners, for family, because I think balance is a bit of a trick. Some people balance means 50-50. Some their balance only needs to be 80-20, and they can sustain a happy, functional life with everybody around them. But do you believe there's such a thing as balance, and do you think you get it right sometimes? Or
well, that's a great question for everybody, right? From the chief level up, for Dan and for me at the captain's level, and with all that we do outside of the fire, our full-time jobs, with what I've mentioned before. But I think it really comes back to, what are your priorities? Are they in line? And do you respect boundaries? And do you delegate time for your family when you're at home? Are you intentional? When you're at work, are you intentional there too? So I think there is such thing as balance. And I think every single one of us can say we've gotten that balance out of whack at times, without a doubt. I can say that. And it's hard, especially think about the volunteer fire service and volunteer firefighters. I mean, talk about finding that balance to where you're at a family event and then you have to decide if you're going to go on a call, in the middle of it, or what's more important, is being with your family more important at that moment, or is serving your community more important at that moment? And those are hard decisions that we have to make. But I think it really comes back to, what's our priorities, and, am I off duty? Am I with my family? Well, I need to be intentional about that.
I find that to be the hardest one. I mean, Dan, I'm not in your position, and Jim and I probably share far more similar roles than somebody such as yourself. But how do you strike that balance? Because surely you're never off duty in so many ways. You carry a lot more responsibility per se than either of us do in your role. So how do you strike that balance?
I've tried very, very hard. I think especially in the last few years, in particular, to make it intentional, like Jim has said. Part of it for me, it just, because of the sort of arrangement or complexity of the department that I'm with, had to do with hiring people in my staff that I trust implicitly, and that I feel comfortable and confident with, that I don't need to be a micromanager. I know that I never liked it when I was a subordinate officer or a firefighter, and I swore that I would never do that. So I like to think that I have some folks in place here that, when I go home, I don't need to worry about a lot of the things that I hired them to worry about. It's kind of that simple, and so far it's been great. And I have a good support system at home as well. But what I really try to do when I'm at home, and this doesn't just go for the fire department, but Jim will tell you too. I mean, this goes for our business of the book and the workshops and things like that. Sometimes it's not the right time to be dealing with something like that, or to talk about something like that. And we've always been very honest with each other, and if we're busy or whatever. But I really try to maneuver those sorts of things around what I know is going on with my family. I think that they did a lot for me, going back several years when I was still trying to get my education and my training and to sort of prepare myself for where I'm at now. They made a lot of sacrifices, and I don't know that I'll ever be able to repay that. But what I do try to do is recognize that fact, and as I see things that are going on that are important to them, either individually or as a group, I try to put myself behind that and make sure that I can deal with this other stuff later if I have to. Every once in a while, I got to come back for a meeting, or I got to come back in for this or that or whatever. And there's unavoidable things that come along with being a fire chief. But open communication, making sure people understand where you're at and where you're going, and what you have coming up. But most of the time, like I said, it's easier for me now. I value a work-life balance more than I ever have. So I not only do I not want to go home and continue to work as a fire chief, like I told you, sometimes I don't want to do anything at all that has anything to do with the fire service or the book or anything like that. I just want to go to a ball game or go hang out with my kids or do whatever it is we're doing, and just be focused on that. And I'm trying very hard to be better at that, and it's important to me. So
I think that's the eternal battle of the tortured sort of passionate emergency responder, because I'm I spent 10 years you think of it as a volunteer firefighter, we say retained or on call or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And you do, Jim, when you were saying there, your family barbecues, or even it's a bit like supervised visits, because you can't be left alone with your children, because if you suddenly have to go and you really at times, you have to remember that the fire department, the fire service, all the emergency services, they were here long before either of us were. They will be here long after.
Yes.
And if you don't,
and we're all replaceable.
And we're all replaceable. Doesn't mean we're not valuable, but we aren't necessarily. Yes, we live in an emergency services, but not everything has to be an emergency to us. It can very quickly become a black hole, and it will swallow everything you give it. You cannot fill it up. There will not be. It's not going to finish. It will just keep sucking the life out of you. I love what you said as well, Dan, about that micromanagement aspect and how. You spend so long climbing up a proverbial ladder, sometimes feeling you need to prove your ability to do things, that when you get there, forcing yourself to create space for other people to grow into that. Otherwise, you're just going to constantly be the individual contributor. You're never going to create space for people to grow into. But that must have been. Did you ever struggle with that? Did you ever? Because sometimes you can create space for somebody and they don't step into it, and the ball gets dropped. So,
everybody on my sort of my first level staff here has different personalities and has different strengths and so forth. And the most important thing, and reading over your prep material, I actually wrote a note down. I think the most important thing when it comes to that team building is actually to have enough confidence and humility to go out and find people to surround yourself with that aren't like you, that are different than you, that have different strengths than you do. And that's what I tried to do. Hopefully I was fairly successful at it, because I kind of know at this point in my career, I know what I can be good at. I also know what I'm not so good at, and maybe are never going to be that good at this point in time. And I want to find people that can do that stuff that I'm not good at. So that we can all help each other. And once you do that, it's not that difficult. At least it hasn't been for me. I never wanted to be on top of everybody, supervising, minute by minute, hour by hour. I would rather them let them spread their wings, go out and do what they do best, and not restrict them at all. I mean, at some point, somebody has to sit in my seat. I think we're building a lot of really great stuff around here with this department. And the last thing I want to have happen is for it to all go by the wayside when I move on.
As soon as you step out.
And the best way for me to do that is just to help prepare the other folks that are here to step into that role and make it their own.
Yeah.
So it's not hard for me at all. I enjoy it.
Jim, Dan shared something really powerful there, I think, about sort of strengths and weaknesses, because I think we've all been taught from the get-go. I personally was that, identify your weaknesses or your development areas, things you want to work on, and work on your weaknesses, and try and get better, try and get stronger. Is that always the best way to go? Because you made a great point there about strengthening your strengths and relying on the fact that there's some wonderful people around there who can do the things that you can't do. Are you the sort of person, Jim, do you work on your weaknesses, or do you try and find people who can support you and sort of demonstrate their greatest talents in what they do?
Weaknesses? What are you talking about? What are weaknesses? I've never heard of them before.
I carve them out with a rusty spoon. I have no weaknesses.
That's right. No, but we all have them. I definitely have mine. And one of the things that Dan and I really promote and talk about within our workshops is that when it comes to fitness, let's just talk about fitness for a second. When it comes to fitness, we all have our strengths and we all have our areas of interest in what we like doing, right? So I don't like doing necessarily strongman competition. I mean, I know I have the body that I look like I do strongman competition.
It's a waste.
But let's just say that. I mean, so there are certain things that aren't appealing to me when it comes to fitness, and there are certain things that I really like doing. And what we encourage people to do is to really focus on their areas of passion, but not neglect where they could use a little development. Don't ignore them. Like I just said, before, what weaknesses? I don't have any weaknesses. Right. So don't ignore those areas. Know that you have them. That's fine. And don't focus all your energy on those weaknesses. right? But make sure you know what they are, and I would say cultivate them or cultivate a plan for dealing with them. When it comes to, it's funny, I don't like running. Dan doesn't like running, but it seems like people, it seems like so many people identify running and long distance running with fitness, right? But we're like, no, you don't have to be a runner. You don't have to do blah, blah, blah when it comes to functional fitness, right? So that's one of the myths we like dispelling in our class. Since we really don't like running, we'd rather do other things that are more applicable to us as firefighters. But yeah, going back to your original point, yes, we have strengths. Yes, we have weaknesses. Let's focus on our strengths. We can continue to develop them. And that if that's what's going to get us in the gym or get us training or working out, stick with those things, but don't ignore those weaknesses.
100%. Now, Firefighter Functional Fitness is ultimately centered around 4 main pillars that pretty much all firefighters, they're kind of like a must-haves. So let's sort of go through each of them just to give people that small expansion for people that haven't yet read the books. I know they'll go on and look at it afterwards, but give us what those breakdowns are, Dan, and why we make them so important. Why are they essentials?
Yeah, we call them the 4 pillars because we feel like that first of all, when you think about firefighter functional fitness as a term or a phrase, one of our fears sort of is that people will just kind of pigeonhole us into working out, and while a big part of what we do is talk about the appropriate ways to train for your role, for your position, there's a lot more to it than that, and it's all connected, right? So so the first pillar is physical fitness, as you might expect, and we kind of devised a sort of a method or a methodology to just try to simplify it for us firefighters that don't need a lot of heavy data and all that. We just want to have somebody tell us what to do, how to do it, and why we should do it, probably most importantly, and then move on with it. So the main thing out of that functional fitness pillar really came out with the Big 8, which is just a methodology for us to teach what you should be focusing on for performance for your job, right? That's functional fitness. That's the essence of it. So you have the 3 foundational components of it, which are core strengths, flexibility, and cardiovascular capacity. And then we further move into functional strength categories. And it's so simple, at least to us it is. It's really just what we do and applying it to your workouts, right? Pushing, pulling, lifting, carrying, and dragging. So everything that we talk about when we go into functional fitness or physical fitness it all revolves around the Big 8 and how to incorporate those movements, exercises, and on the larger scale, how to incorporate all of that into an overall regimen that's appropriate for firefighters, not necessarily appropriate for a football player or a gymnast or an accountant, but these are appropriate for firefighting for what we do out on the fire ground. And then you have hydration, which is another pillar. It really is just to the point, is just all about the methodology behind proactively hydrating your body, making sure that you rehab properly.
Walk around the world just dehydrated. I would say 80 to 85% of the public. People really, and it's one of those things that you don't know how good it is to be properly hydrated when you don't hydrate. You need to spend a huge problem 2 weeks really hydrating before you really feel the benefit, and then you're like, geez, there's so many underlying health conditions that I believe could be rectified just by simple hydration. I think it's too simple for people to think it's true because they've never given it a go.
The problem for us in the fire service, though, is that, everything that you just described is absolutely correct, right? The vast majority of the population probably is at some level of dehydration all the time. But an office worker can overcome those deficiencies a lot more capably than a firefighter that shows up for work in the morning already dehydrated and is faced with those challenges and then some as soon as you go out on a run and you catch a working fire or something like that. We are already behind the 8 ball, and we intertwine the whole body systems discussion and risk factors and all the things that happen to your body systems when you are under stress, when you're dehydrated, when you're heat stressed, and just simply working at the level that we work at. It's exacerbated tremendously by dehydration, right? So way more important, we think, for folks like us that are in functional or that we call industrial athletes or occupational athletes, to make sure that we're proactive about that stuff, right? Pillar three, another pillar would be rest and recovery. And we talk in depth about that in a lot of different ways, right? Active and passive rest and recovery, recovering well from your actual training, also recovering well by not training sometimes. And of course, the importance of sleep.
I found that to be one of the hardest ones for me. I've had so many injuries in the past. I always talk to people about the pendulum, because initially you can find the disciplines hard to adopt, just to get into the routine of hydrating, of eating well, of exercising regularly, of ensuring it's a functional style fitness. And then when you get that ingrained, the pendulum can swing too far when you think you need to be doing it every single day. And we also sort of we really, really admire and speak about people being real savages and training hard every single day and all these YouTube videos and everything like that. And people can very quickly get themselves into a hole where they're never fully recovered, especially for people like us that aren't sleeping on a regular basis. And you can really cause a lot of damage very fast there.
Well, Jim and Jim could speak to some injuries he suffered in the past, because he was doing those sorts of things where, he was never, he's working out 8 days a week, 27 hours a day, I joke, right? But it's really important that we give our bodies the time to repair, to rest, to recover from the trauma basically that we're putting it through. And if you can get that through your head, which is probably the more difficult part, you'll benefit more from the training that you do if you give yourself the rest and the recovery time that you need, right? So, we talk a lot about that. And then, of course, the last and most fun thing to talk about is nutrition. We make it clear we're not registered dietitians or nutritionists or anything like that, but what we do is we share a sort of a philosophy, if you will, or a mindset of moderation, and really it all boils down to this concept that food is fuel. And so if you think of yourself as a sports car, if you put, diesel fuel in a high performance race car, it's probably not going to run as well as if you put the proper fuel in, right? Well, your body's no different. Unfortunately, there's longer term effects that you're going to suffer from that too, other risk factors that will come up. So we just try to get across the importance of putting the right foods in your body from the right sources in the right amounts, instead of focusing on, fad diets and things like that may work for you in the short term, but are difficult, if not impossible, to sustain. So it's more of a philosophical approach. We talk about proteins and carbs and fats and fiber and all of those sorts of things. We discuss sugar and how addictive it is. We talk about all those things, but try again to do it in a very practical sense, if you will, so that people realize they can set themselves up for success by making small changes instead of trying to change course 90 or 180 degrees in a day or two to fix a problem that may have been perking around for years, right?
You've got to turn the temperature up small. It's the old analogy of, you put a frog in a cold water and turn it up 1 degree at a time, that it will sit there and boil. But if you throw it straight into boiling water, it's going to leap straight out. You've got to turn the dial up little by little, otherwise it just completely throws people out. I love what you said right at the beginning around some of the base principles around physical fitness, because talking about nutrition and physical fitness, people get so attracted to complexity. But Jim, do you think there's a certain amount of freedom that can be taken from making things far more simple? Because when you're like sitting in a training room and there'll be an acronym or a mnemonic on the board, and to some people, it's absolutely obvious. They know what it is. But probably 80% of the room have not got a single clue what that thing means. And it just takes for somebody to make it nice and simple. I always say to people, the KISS principle, keep it simple. And that really frees people up to go, right, okay, so if I just do that, if I just adhere to these principles, that's good enough for me, because I've read this thing in a magazine, and I've spoke to this guy down the gym, and I read this thing online, and we make it so complex. Have you found at all, Jim, that the aspect of that simplicity is that a factor of empowering people to really get out there and do it, showing that it's not as complex as that they think it needs to be?
Well, first of all, we as firefighters, we need more acronyms in the fire service.
We need loads.
No, but Dan talked to this before, and first and foremost, firefighters want and crave simple, right? Simple leadership, simple training, just simple ways to do the job. Don't overcomplicate it. And that's what we really try to do. Dan talked about the what, why, and how method. So teach a firefighter what you want them to learn, teach them why it's important so they adopt it, so they have buy-in, and then how to implement it. And that's really what we tried to do with all of things within the book and within our workshops. And simple doesn't always mean that it's easy, right? Simple isn't always easy. It can be difficult to do or adopt, but the principle needs to be simple for firefighters to really adopt it and make a lasting long-term effect.
I think there's a big aspect to be said there about, when you get a new recruit versus somebody who's been in 20 years, it needs to be simple and they need to follow it to the letter. They might look at somebody that's been in 20 years and go, oh, well, they're doing it slightly different. It's because they've been disciplined and they've mastered the principle. Then once you're disciplined, I would say to people, there's freedom in discipline. Once you've got disciplined, then you can dance around the margins a little bit. You can start to find what suits you as an individual, but you've got to do those simple basics first. You've really got to master those simple bits.
Yeah, and anyone can go down a rabbit hole or a tangent as far as they want to go. Like you were talking about, talking to different sources, reading different articles, listening to different podcasts about a certain topic. And that's fine. That's all good. But when you're first getting into it, you need simple. And let's just take, for example, one of the big 8 that Dan talked about is the push, right? We do pushing movements on the fire ground, right? So that's the basic, simple premise. Well, you can really break that down into different ways going forward, which we do a little bit, but we don't go too far down. But you push forward, you push above your head, you push at angles, you push to the side, you rotate. So, there's a lot of different ways that you can break down that simplified concept of the push, if you will, and get it into different categories of this is how many reps you do, this is how many sets you do, and this is the movements you want to do. So, yeah, start with simple always.
Sometimes I'll speak to clients or people joining the services and stuff like that, and they will talk about, I read this article and there's this Olympic athlete that does this thing, and I'm not sure whether or not I need to be having 3 more grams of this or 6 more grams of that, or I'm not sure what supplement to take. And I'm like, he's at step 137, okay? You're at step 3 and you're not doing it. Okay, do step 1, 2, 3, 4.
You're not doing step 1 and 2 very well right now. Start over.
I said train 30 minutes 4 times a week. I said hydrate, and I said do these functional movements. And they're like, yeah, but I thought I had to take that special supplement. And I thought, no, stop. What they're doing might be right. Yeah, but they are at step 137. They've already done steps 1 to 10 for the last 5 years. You've got to nail them basics.
And that's the other thing is like that may be right for that Olympic athlete, right. And that's right for them individually. And there's especially with nutrition, there can be things that are right for somebody individually, but they're not going to work for everybody, right? I'm not someone who can count macros, who can count calories. But some people love that. That's their thing, and that's what helps them be successful. I would not personally be successful with that in the long run, right? I could do it briefly, but it's not going to be sustainable for me personally.
Yeah.
So
totally agree. I wanted to just ask you again about rest, Dan, because it kind of brings us full circle back to when we were speaking about being able to unplug, being able to do things other than just the fire service all of the time. Why do you think it's becoming so difficult for people to get that rest these days? We're in such a society where we should work until we're dead and sleep is the cousin of death and we should just work and try and more is always bigger and better. How difficult do you think people find it to associate with rest and appropriate rest and not feeling lazy?
Yeah, I think that the biggest enemy we have in general in society these days is just the unbelievable amount of stimulation and distractions that we're faced with on a daily basis.
100%.
And again, if we're talking about firefighters, now we have to multiply that by a lot of different other factors. many of which have to do with, in the States here, most firefighters are working, a 24 or 48-hour shift. You're running calls all hours of the day and night, depending on how busy you are. And so, when you look at all that, all of those stimulations and distractions, and then add to it the type of schedule that we ask people to work, it becomes that much more critical that your time that you're not at work, that you really, really focus on your sleep habits and eliminating some of those distractions. And again, it doesn't have to be anything earth-shattering or difficult, at least in theory. It's really more of a mental thing for me. Is are you able to put this away an hour before you go to bed? Are you able to do? If you like to listen to the radio or the scanner or whatever, are you able to turn that stuff off and tune that stuff out when you're not? You really even need to know about it, right? When you're not at work, you've really got to concentrate on doing the best job you can of getting that 7 or 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep when you're not on duty, because you just can't do that when you are working. And the more we learn about sleep deprivation and its ties to all sorts of risk factors, including heart disease and obesity and diabetes and even cancer and all that.
Sleep deprivation as a torture.
Your mental health.
There's a reason they use it as a torture.
Your mental health is tied directly to it. It's all connected. Everything that we talk about here is connected. The benefits of, working out and how, that can lead to a reduction in your chances of contracting certain types of cancer, for example, or how well it benefits you in terms of your own mental health and that kind of thing. So, I think that, we talk a lot about it in our workshops, just doing the simple things to avoid those or eliminate those distractions and stimulations and focus on actually sleeping, which is like the easiest thing for most of us, the easiest thing we can possibly do. And if you've done all that, if you've eliminated those distractions and those stimulations, and you're still having a hard time, if you're sleeping in a cool, dark room, you don't have any noise, you're using the best methodology that and you're still having trouble, then it's probably time for you to have a sleep study done, because there could very well be something that's going on there that you could easily have assistance with, and it will turn your whole life around, really, in a lot of respects, because you'll feel a lot better, you'll mentally and physically. But for me, it's just about eliminating the distractions and shutting all that stuff off and paying attention to what's most important when you're not sitting in the firehouse.
I think you're so right. I mean, Jim, is there a disconnection, or is there sort of a misunderstanding with how powerful some of this stuff is? And I mean by that, the technology and everything like that. Deep down, we are still like primitive apes. We are not capable of dealing with all of this stuff. I think we have a misunderstanding that when people say, oh no, I can have a telly on in my bedroom when I go to sleep, it doesn't really bother me. I can go on my phone late at night because honestly I'm just bored, and then I go on my phone because I can't sleep, and then I put my phone down and I can't sleep, so I go back on my phone. And they're constantly forcing that stimulation into their mind. These devices are so much more powerful than I think we have any comprehension. Even from the lights to the noises they make, they're all designed to stimulate that dopamine. How do you manage to convince people of this, Jim? When you're talking about getting that rest, when you're talking about, maybe you don't have a television in the room, or maybe leave your phone outside the room, or switch it off an hour before you go to bed. Do you ever have sort of a pushback from people saying, oh no, it's not that, it doesn't really bother me, I just struggle to sleep?
You hit the nail on the head, and we need to be able to disconnect, right? Whether it's when we go on vacation, whether when we lay down for bed, or even before we get to bed, saying, I am not going to look at my phone or my tablet or my device or whatever, TV, 30 minutes before bed, 15 minutes before bed, whatever. Or if I wake up in the middle of the night, I'm not going to reach for my phone. I mean, I know Chief Frank Biscuso said he would wake up just from being on the job forever. He would wake up at 3:30 in the morning, and the first thing he would do is reach for his phone, to where it became such a detriment to him that he actually started sleeping with his phone downstairs in a completely other room of the house, because that's how bad it was. And I think it can be that way for some of us. So it really comes back to two things we talked about already: discipline and balance, right? Are we having the discipline to not look at our phone if it's at our bedside in the middle of the night or before we go to sleep or whatever. And number two, finding that discipline, that balance of, hey, if I'm with my family, I don't need to be staring at my screen 100% of the time. Like we said before, I need to be intentional with my time with my family or my friends or wherever I am, right? If I'm out at a restaurant, am I paying more attention to my phone or am I paying attention to the people who I'm with at my table, right? Like present. Simple things like that. Yeah. Am I being present? Am I being intentional? So you really hit it on the head. There's such good power in being connected like we are right now. And there can be so much negative energy and negative power of being too connected all the time.
It's knowing and understanding that it's far more powerful than we have a comprehension for. I love the connectivity of it, but I'm very aware that I don't stand a chance against it. So I plug in, I do what I want, I get what I need from it. Sounds horrible, sounds selfish, and then I let it go. I think for some people, it's like grabbing hold of an electric cable. They can't seem to let go. The voltage starts to surge through them and they don't realize that it's sucking the life out of them. That's my biggest concern. I mean, you said something great there about being present as well. And Dan, I wanted to ask you, because you've worked in this leadership role for a very long time now. You've done a massive amount of development. Being present with people was always a great leadership tactic from my perspective. But for somebody like yourself, I wanted to ask what you feel are some of the greatest aspects of leadership that either you've seen working with great leaders or that you feel we need to really focus in on those essentials.
So in terms of the qualities of the leaders that I've admired and I try to emulate, I think that, humility is first and foremost, right? When you have your humility, if you want credibility, it comes from humility, in my opinion. So you also, you have to be curious, humility, curiosity, and probably if I had to pick another one that served me well is to have that perseverance or that grit to be able to see things through the difficulties and the obstacles that you come up against, the creativity to go around them, over them, through them, whatever you have to do to get what needs to be done. But so that would be for me, right? And I know that those things have always served me well. I've learned from them as well, but it also goes back to that point I made earlier about building a team that maybe complements you in certain ways with some of those character strengths, if you will, but also brings other ones to the table as well. Like, I mean, maybe I need somebody with a little more creativity than I have, right? Somebody to make sure that they can tell me that I need to be more patient with things because I have no patience whatsoever sometimes. I need those things too.
Jim, I wanted to ask you about confidence and strategies about people becoming a little bit more confident.
Yeah. So I love the topic of confidence because for firefighters, I think that it comes really from a lot of different areas, one of which is definitely competence, which is so important for us. And I believe those two are really interrelated. The more competent we can be as firefighters, it's only going to build our confidence. And the more confident we are, the more it's going to build our competence. But one of the important things we all need to know is that, and we all know this can run rampant in the fire service, is the downfall of ego and arrogance and selfishness, that me. So distinguishing and putting apart, making sure that you don't have ego, but you do have confidence. And that can be that can be pretty difficult for some people. As Dan said, one of the key characteristics that he really identifies with leadership is humility, right? So if we start with that individually, and then we can talk about becoming more confident and making sure that we're not centered on ourselves and we don't have that ego. So as long as, if you'll indulge me a little bit, I think, the confidence, starts with humility. And then if we're going to build off it from there, it's just having a positive attitude, being optimistic, because we know negativity runs rampant also in the fire service.
Absolutely. I find that one challenging.
People find so many different ways to complain about something or a process when it takes more effort complaining than it does fixing the problem.
And it
right?
sucks so much energy out of the team and out of life sometimes. And it's not just, in the emergency services. We see it everywhere, and we're almost naturally trained for negativity. We want to point out things that are a threat to us, because that's like, when we were back in the primitive days of, the caveman, if it was a rustle in the bushes, we had to assume it was the worst, because otherwise, if you just thought it was something great, it might come out and kill you. But now it still exists in us, and we sometimes we can be guilty of hunting out reasons why we can't do something, or reasons why something is bad, and we act like there's a reward for it.
Yep. So I would say, starting with, being optimistic is one step to becoming more confident. I think also you have to have the confidence to fail, or to struggle, or to not be a perfectionist, right? You need to make sure that you can fall short, still giving your best effort, right? But you need to make sure that you can stand back up from those failures, from those shortcomings, and make sure that you bounce back up from it. I think the more that we do that, the more we allow ourselves to fail or fall short, and the more we get back up from our failures, the more confidence it's really going to breed within each of us. And if I could add, a couple more, I think goal setting is so important. So having small short-term goals, but also lofty long-term goals, of, say you're a brand new firefighter. It's okay to say that one day I want to be a captain or an officer, or, it's even okay to say one day I want to become a fire chief. That shouldn't be your immediate goal.
No.
But I think maybe just setting those good short-term goals, to achieve over the next month to 6 months are so important. And then we use those smaller achievable goals as stepping stones to build our confidence and achieve smaller levels of success that eventually build to higher levels of success. So that's really important to me. And then I think for firefighters, one of the last things that we can do is just train, and build that confidence within our craft, developing the right skills, the right mindset, the right knowledge, even the right attitude is so important. And a lot of that just comes from training and having a mentality of just staying curious and wanting to always improve ourselves. I believe all those things really roll up into, that's how we can become more confident.
So on that note, in terms of failure, do you have a favorite failure? Is there a failure that you look back on and go, wow, that was some post-traumatic growth that went on right there? Is there anything that really you have as a favorite failure?
Yeah. So one of the failures I really wrote about in depth in the Firefighter Success book, because I do talk about failure and overcoming adversity and struggles a lot, because I really believe that's all those things are so crucial to our success as firefighters and as people and as individuals outside of the fire service. But, one I wrote about was, training, or I should say, when I was going for a promotion to lieutenant from a firefighter. So I had 7 years on the job. And mind you, me and my type A personality, I studied nonstop, hour after hour after hour, preparing for every single part and every single step of the lieutenant's promotional exam, right? Just trying to cover all my bases, and maybe I focused on it a little too much and, had maybe a perfectionist mindset going into it. But there was one scenario when we have to do like a hands-on leading a crew through a mock fire call, mock fire environment, like a first alarm or a structure fire response.
Yes.
And so I was leading my crew. And basically I did several different mistakes that I wrote about in the book, just searching the rooms before putting the fire out. My first priority should have been locating the fire and putting it out. That's just so important. The other thing was that I lost crew accountability in the middle of it. And I didn't follow our SOG. So there are multiple mistakes within that. And eventually what happened is that I ran out of time in my scenario. And I basically didn't check all the boxes. I didn't get all the points I wanted to. And I didn't really carry myself in the light that I really wanted to, and didn't perform at the level. And I really beat myself up hard about it, because I wanted to ace this promotional exam. But as we all know, everything happens for a reason. And if we're not learning from our shortcomings, if we're not learning from our failures and building back from that, then we're not becoming the best that we can be. But what actually happened is that I took that lieutenant exam again within the next year or a year later, and I got number one on the next one, and
awesome.
That's when I got promoted. So, I took everything I learned from that first failure, all those set of failures within the exam, and believe it or not, that was actually one of the interview questions. When I was going through the second time, they said, you tested for lieutenant, within the last year. Did you use your experiences that you learned from, or your failures and all that? Did you use that to make yourself better, or how did you do that? And some of the other people who were testing with me, some of the other candidates, firefighters, said no. They wanted to be overly confident.
Yeah.
They didn't change anything, but I was very honest and be like, yeah, I made a mistake here, and here. I learned from it. I didn't repeat that mistake again.
Yeah.
Well, and I guess that's what they wanted to hear, because I got number one on that new list. So it worked out well for me in the end.
I think it's a massive piece of self-awareness. I always say beware the person that's had no failures, because we're all going to have one. There's that is waiting behind the corner for all of us. And if you haven't had a big setback yet, then it might come when we're together. It might come when you're working with me, or maybe you've had it and you haven't learned from it. Making mistakes is fine. Everybody makes mistakes. Don't make the same one 2 or 3 times, because you haven't got that humility to take ownership over the bits that were in your control. And that can be a lesson that unfortunately has to get learned 2 or 3 times by some people, when it's painful to watch.
Exactly. And if it's, you're making that mistake, like you said, 2 or 3 times, is it really a failure of forgetting or falling short? Are you consciously making this mistake over and again? Well, you're only really failing yourself at that point.
Absolutely. Jim, I know in the interest of time, we unfortunately lost Dan, but he's a busy guy, and it was awesome to be able to get that time with him. I know we're going to get back together, because I desperately, and I'm going to discipline myself now not to delve too far into firefight success. We're going to follow up with that on the next one, but I just wanted to really thank you for your time today, and for the two of you coming and spending this time with us. There's some massive takeaways in terms of functional fitness. We're going to put the links in the podcast below. Before we go, any final points you think the big essential takeaways?
Just with, what we talked about, keep it simple and make sure your approach to your fitness is comprehensive, that it works for you. Don't worry about what anyone else is doing, because that may not work for you. So you need to just dive in, get our book, take one of our workshops. We have a robust YouTube channel with over 400 videos on there.
No, I didn't realize how much was on there. I was on it again the other day, and I was like, Jesus, you guys have put some work in here. That looks fantastic. and it's free as well. There's so much free content there for people to be able to benefit from.
Yeah, so definitely get the book, and then the YouTube channel is definitely a complement to that.
Yeah.
And then we go out and teach.
If you've actually read the book as well.
Yeah, right. But go to firefighterfunctionalfitness.com, and that's where you can get the book, and just check it out. And you can get some previews. You can get our special report download, the 10 biggest mistakes that firefighters make with their fitness and how to avoid them. So that's there too as a free download at our website. And just reach out to us, firefighterfunctionalfitness@gmail.com. We'll get both Dan and I, and we reply to every single email. So if you have a question, that's burning in your mind, and you just, about functional fitness or whatever, we love to talk about this stuff, obviously.
Yeah.
So if we can answer that question, just shoot us an email or reach out to contact us through the website, firefighterfunctionalfitness.com.
And I'm the testimony of that. If a nobody firefighter in the UK can manage to get hold of both of you, and for a brief moment in time manage to navigate you into the same conversation, then hey, anybody can do it. Jim, thank you so much for your time, my man. I know you have a family in and around you, and I know every second you spend, spreading the word and spreading the gospel and spreading your passion is a time away from your family. So please send our thanks, and on behalf of the listeners as well, to your loved ones for taking time out of your busy day to be with us.
No, thanks for having me on. It was an honor, and I love talking about this stuff. So stay healthy.
That's it, brother. I'll speak to you soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Pete.
Thank you, brother. Take care.
Bye.
Hey folks, just jumping back in to say thanks again for jumping onto the Firefighters podcast today. If you are an admirer of the emergency services, if you yourself are a firefighter, be sure to jump over to our YouTube, Instagram channels, check out some of your favorite episodes, some of your favorite sound bites, and learn a little bit more about all of the guests. And there's so many little rabbit holes to go down for your own personal development as well. Be sure to stay up to date with all of our latest guests by jumping over to the email link, check the notes in the podcast brief, and make sure as well for yourself, if you want to be into the chance to win yourself a pair of Hikes boots, along with our partner Hikes, we are giving away a brand new pair. Absolutely no tricks to this one at all, no funny business, no small print, 100% no paying for your postage or anything like that. You can get yourself a hand on elite footwear from Hikes, from the Firefighters podcast. Jump over, find the post, tag a friend, make sure you find your favorite episode, share it to your page, and that's all you need to do to be in for a chance to win every single month running right up to the end of this year. So for your chance to be in it, you've got to get over there, you've got to check it out. And all that's left to say is thank you so much for coming over and checking out the podcast once again. We are on such a hot streak right now. We've got some amazing guests coming up. We've got some more world record holders. We've got some more lifesavers and some more heroes of our community. So until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, stay hungry, and I will see you real soon right here on the Firefighters Podcast.